this chapter, we're going to explore factoring. In this lesson, we're going to look at factoring by grouping.
All right, so here we go. So we're going to take a look at another form of factoring here, or factoring by grouping, like you already said here. And so here's kind of the procedure. What we're going to do is you're going to first of all look at the terms you've got in the expression. You're going to look for any common factors, and you should always take out common factors first. Then typically, you know that you're doing factoring by grouping when you've got 4 different terms in your expression. Now it doesn't have to be like that, but it's almost always like that in the context of what we're going to be asking you here. So with grouping, what we do then is we group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together using brackets, okay, but do not include the sign in between. Actually, what we want to do here is, what I would encourage you to do is, I do want you to include the sign in between. What I want you to do here is when you group them together, you're going to take the first 2 terms, so you're going to have A and B. What I want you to do is you're going to have a C and a D there. You're going to put brackets around those 2, and you're going to shove a big old plus sign in between those 2 sets of brackets that you got there. You're always going to start off with an addition sign in between. Now, that's not going to look natural to start off with some questions because you're going to see negatives in here. And I'll show you what I mean by that. We're going to shove a big old plus sign in between. Then what we're going to do is from each bracket here, we're going to do the whole thing with the greatest common factor again. We're going to take out the greatest common factor out of each of the sets of brackets there. Okay, should be the same. At least that's the result. If factoring by factoring by grouping is going to work here, then after you've taken out what's common out of each set of brackets there, what's left over should be common, and then we'll pull that out as well. Okay, and that's going to be the final result here. Now this isn't really explaining it all that much. You really need to just see it. So I'll tell you what, let's just stop taking a look at the theory of it. Let's just do some examples. Okay, so here we go. So I want to factor this right here, and I can see that there's 4 terms. So this suggests to me that grouping is going to be the way to go through this. What I'm going to do here, first of all, is look for any common factors, and there aren't any. So I'm going to take and put parentheses around the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms, and I'm going to shove a big old positive sign in between. Okay, because remember, I can drop the parentheses with a positive sign in between and it doesn't do anything, which is important, okay? And now what I do is I take a look at just those first 2 terms. X cubed minus 5x squared. And I can see that there's a common x squared to both of those, and that's going to leave me with an x minus 5. X squared. If I take that x squared and multiply it back through, I go right back up to this previous step here. Between these 2, I can see that there's a common factor of 3 to the 3 and the 15, so I'll take out the 3, and that's going to leave me with x minus 5. Okay, now that that's done, when I look at the 2 terms that I've got here, notice that I've got a x minus 5 multiplied by x squared, x minus 5 multiplied by 3. Well, that x minus 5 is common. So just like I took out an x squared here and multiplied it out front, and that left me with an x here and a negative 5 here, I'm going to actually take that x minus 5 and write it out because it's obviously been distributed to 2 terms. Now, what has it been distributed to? Well, if I cancel those out there or cover those up, I'm left with an x squared and a positive 3. And so that's what I get. When this thing is factored down, I get x minus 5 multiplied by x squared plus 3. That's factoring by grouping. Okay, let's do another one. Here, again, first thing I'm going to look for here is anything that's common. And I don't see anything that's shared by all 4 terms here, so equals. And I'm going to put parentheses around the first 2 terms. And now here's where this is going to get a little weird because of that negative sign right there. But I am going to put parentheses around the last 2 terms. And I'm going to include that sign with it. Because you really want to think of this as, don't think of this as minus 3xy. Think of it more like adding negative 3xy. So that negative needs to go with that term, with a minus 15y there. And I will put a big old plus sign in between. So I'm pushing that sign. Okay, so I'll just erase that little bit of a mess that I made there in the middle. I'm going to take that sign and I'm going to push it over into that second set of parentheses. Now, I look at each set of parentheses. What's common to 4x squared plus 20x? Well, there's a common factor of 4 and a common x, which is going to leave me with x left over here, a single x, and a 5. So 4x times x plus 5. Over here, there's a negative common to both those terms. There's a negative 5. And actually there's a y that's common there too. I can take out that common y. Now what that's going to, sorry, I said 5. I don't know why I said 5. It's -3, which will leave me with a 5 over there. So -3 and a y there, which would leave me with a positive x here and a positive 5 there. And again, I know that I'm on the right track because I end up with this binomial that I see in both terms there. So that binomial was shared to both, and if I cancel those out, I'm left with 4x minus 3y. And there we go. So x plus 5 multiplied by 4x minus 3y. Okay, that's not terribly clear, but anyway. Keep going. Let's do some more. 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 15x minus 30. Well, okay, first of all, there is a common factor of 3 to every term there, which will leave me with x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 10. Now I look at what's inside there. So 3, and I'm going to put square brackets around everything just so that I can see that there's the two layers here. There will be x cubed minus 2x squared plus, okay, because I'm going to put that a big old plus sign in between, 5x minus 10. Okay, now still I'm going to use those big square brackets there. In my first term here, I've got a common x squared. It's going to leave me with an x minus 2. Here I've got a common factor of 5, and that's it. When I take that out, I'll be left with an x there and a minus 2 there. So between those two terms, I can see that there's a common binomial factor, x minus 2. So here's the 3 that I took out. Okay, I'm going to take out an x minus 2 out of those two terms, basically like I did before, where I'm left with x squared plus 5. Now, when it's written like this, because everything's multiplied together, I could erase those square brackets. I don't have to. I can leave them there. They're not doing anything. It cleans it up a little bit if you get rid of them, though. But either way, that's fine. Now, one of the things I haven't mentioned at this point, and I probably should, is that when you've factored, once you've got it down to this point right here, you might want to just look and just see, is there any other factoring that you can do? Because sometimes the process of taking out these common factors introduces another type of factoring. For example, I could have also introduced a difference of squares. Now, I didn't here, but that could have happened. Just be on the lookout for that. Okay, question number 4. Is there anything common to all 4 of those terms here? Well, a 2xy, x, boy, you know, even in those first 3 terms, there's nothing common. So what I'll do here is just put parentheses around the first 2 terms. Big old plus sign, parentheses around the last 2 terms. Now, what is common to those first 2? Well, between the 2 and the 14, there's a common factor of 2. And I can see that there's an x in both, and that leaves me with y minus 7b. Over here, I can see there between 3 and 21, there's a common factor of 3, and then there's an a in both. When I take that out, I'm left with a y minus, same thing, 7b. And I anticipated that. In fact, if that doesn't happen, I know that I gotta fix something. Okay? So there's this common binomial factor, y minus 7b in brackets. So I'll write that out front here. Cover those up, and I realize I'm left with 2x plus 3a. And there we go. Let's keep going. All right. 2mb plus 5an minus 10am minus bn. Okay, again, I'm looking for something common to all 4 of those terms, and I'm not seeing it. So 2mb plus 5an. Now there's that negative there, but I want that to be in parentheses. And I will put a plus sign in between. Now, what's common to 2mb and 5an? Nothing. There's nothing common there, and there's nothing common here. Okay? So, now that might look like that's a dead end. And actually, I mean, it's enough to make me stop and say, okay, something's not right there. Let's erase what I just did there. But it's not actually a dead end. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to move terms around here. And often what I can do to get some headway here is to honestly swap the middle 2 terms here. Now, that doesn't always work. Sometimes you got to move other stuff around here, but just watch what happens here. If I swap those middle terms around, okay, bring that negative 10am in, bring that 5an over, and bear in mind that that negative that in front, wherever I move that 10am, I'm going to move that negative, and I've got this negative bn at the end here. I'm going to leave those, move those around there. Now, if I group together the first two terms, big old plus sign in between, group together the last two terms, now I do have something in each of these that I can factor out. So for example, in this first set of parentheses here, there's a common factor of 2 and an m, which is going to leave me with b minus 5a. In that second set of parentheses there, the only thing that's common between the two of them is that letter n. That's okay. But that leaves me with 5a minus b. Oh, now that's tantalizing. Look at that. B, 5a, 5ab. Oh, that's so good. But this is negative 5a, positive 5a, positive b, negative b. And I don't really like that. Now, I'm going to make this look, right now, there's something about this that doesn't look pretty anyway. I'm going to make it look pretty. I basically just have to choose one of these, and it doesn't really matter which one I choose here. I want this one to look more like this one. I like the fact that it's 5a minus b. I like the fact that the a comes first, minus the b, okay, and it's positive here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor a negative out of this. Now, factoring a negative, all it does is change signs. So I'm going to put the negative out front with a 2m, because it's just a negative 1 multiplied by 2 multiplied by m. I just multiplied it out here. Not only is that going to change the signs here, but it's going to, I didn't have to factor out the negative to do this, but it's going to give me an opportunity to swap these. So I'll make that positive 5a minus b. And if you put the negative back in, you'll see how you'll get your negative 5a and your positive b back. Plus n 5a minus b. Now there's a common factor of 5a minus b. I will pull that out. Okay, and remember it is distributed here to this negative 2m plus n. Okay, now let's look at another one. Okay, 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 4x. Oh, okay, well there's not a lot that's common. In fact, there's nothing that's common to all of those terms. So again, we group together the first two terms. We group together the last two terms, and we put a big old plus sign in between. Okay, now, what's common to those first two terms? Well, in terms of the coefficient, there's a common 3. And then between the x cubed and the x squared, there's a common x squared, which leaves us with x minus 2 left over. With these last ones here, there's a common factor of 4, positive 4, and a y. And that leaves me with an x minus 2. So then once again, I see this common binomial factor there that we're going to yank out front, x minus 2. And what does that leave me with? Well, when you've pulled those out, you're left with 3x squared plus 4y. Is there anything else that we can do to factor that? Not really. That's about as good as that's going to get. So there we go. All right, let's do a few more here. Okay, just want to make sure that you've had plenty of practice with this. This pattern can get utilized in other contexts. So the more comfortable you are with this, the better. This one right here, yx minus xz minus zy plus y squared. Okay, well there's nothing common to all four of those terms. So let us put parentheses around the first two terms. Remember, I'm going to take that negative that's right there. I'm going to pull it together because I'm going to associate that with that third term. There's the fourth term, so I put parentheses around that whole thing, and I'll put a plus sign in between. Now, here, there's a common factor of x, which leaves me with y minus z. Over here, there's a common factor of y, so I'll take out the y. It's going to leave me with negative z plus y. Okay, now, the reason why this question's here is because we don't want you to get thrown off if something like this should show up. Because notice this is y minus z, negative z plus y here. They do look different. But the z is negative here, it's negative here. The y is positive here, it's positive here. They are actually the same. Now, it would probably look better, in which case it will feel better if you write them in the correct order. So if I just take these guys and switch them so that they're alphabetical, you're probably going to be more comfortable with that. It looks better, which means it's going to be easier to work with. Now, I've got this binomial factor that's common, so I'll take out the common y plus z, and that's going to leave me with, in my second set of brackets there, x plus y. Okay, good one. Let's keep going here. All right, 2x squared plus ax squared minus 2y. All right, there's nothing common to all four terms. So let's group together the first two terms. Group them, the last two terms together, pulling that negative in. Whoops, I don't know why I wrote a there. Now I'll take out what's common, but there's nothing there. Between 2x squared and ay, there's nothing common. So what we'll do, I'm hoping that I can remedy that by simply switching or swapping the middle two terms, which is going to leave me with 2x squared minus ax squared plus ay minus 2y. Now, let's group together those middle two terms and the final two terms. Between those two middle terms here, what's common is just the x squared, which gives me 2 minus a. Over here, there's a common y there. Take that out and I'll get a minus 2. Okay, well, these are not the same. 2 minus a is not the same as a minus 2. So I'm going to change one of these things. Now, I'll be honest with you, I like the way this one looks better than this one because I like the a with the negative 2 here. So I'm very tempted to pull a negative out of here. And if I do that, it'll be negative x squared. I'm going to make the a positive and I'm going to pull it out front. I'm going to make the 2 negative and put it behind. Now it's common to both here. And so I can factor out that common binomial factor a minus 2, which will leave me with negative x squared plus y. Now, at this point right here, there is something else that we can do, and I want you to be aware of this. I didn't do it with the last question that ended up looking like this, because again, we're just trying to get comfortable with this. But now that we've done a few more, I don't particularly like the way this looks either with this negative in front. So I'm going to factor it out. Now if I do, it becomes a factor, meaning they're all multiplied together here. So pulling a negative out as a factor makes it a factor of the whole thing. So I'm just going to write it out front here. So the negative that I pull out of here goes right up front. That's going to make this positive x squared. But if you take a negative out, everything inside that parentheses has to change signs here. So it's got to be x squared minus y. That's what I'm looking for. Now at this point, I might even look at this and wonder, well, I wonder if I can factor this even further. That's starting to look like a difference of squares, but the y isn't being squared. So that's a dead end. I would stop right there. All right, a couple more. There's nothing common to those terms here, so I'll put parentheses around the first two, parentheses around the last two here. There's nothing, there was no issue with the signs here. It was just positive, so I didn't have to worry about that. In the first two terms, there's a common m to the fifth. Notice there's nothing common to the m and the 1 here. So the best I can do is write it as m plus 1. Now, that is okay, though, if that happens in one of these two sets of brackets that I create here. The reason why that works here, everybody, is because as long as this ends up being the binomial factor that's common, that's totally okay. If I write that out front here, here's just the thing you got to remember. If I cover this up, then what I'm left with here is going to be m to the fifth plus, well, all right now, every time that I've done this, I've written down the number or the expression that was sitting right here. I've written that down here. So what happens if you don't see a coefficient there? What is it if it's not visible? And the answer is 1. So this becomes m plus 1 multiplied by m to the fifth plus 1. Okay, one more. X cubed minus 9x squared minus 4x plus 36. Okay, well, there's nothing common to all four terms, so here, let's do it again. X cubed minus 9x squared is my first two terms. There is a negative there. That's not what I'm going to write in the middle. I'm going to put a plus sign there, and I'll put that negative over with the 4x. Every time there was a negative in that middle there, I moved it over. Now, what's common to x cubed minus 9x squared? X squared. So leave me with x minus 9. What's common to the negative 4x and the 36? Well, it's going to be a 4. But be careful. I want to be kind of proactive with this one. Notice that in here, the x is positive. If all I do is take out a 4 out of those two numbers, that negative is going to be stuck with the x. So I want to address this before it becomes an issue. I'm going to take that negative 4 out. That's going to leave me with positive x, and 36 divided by that negative 4 will be negative 9. All right, now it's x minus 9, x minus 9. I can pull that out. Okay, and I'm left with, when you cover that up here, x squared minus 4. All right, now I've been mentioning that this could be an issue for a little while now. Now take a look at what you're left with here. Can you factor anything else here? Well, yes you can. X squared minus 4 is a difference of squares. That becomes x minus 2, x plus 2. Okay, square minus a square, you can break that down into x minus 2, x plus 2. There you go. So always be on the lookout for that. Look for, so just some things here to remember. Look for common factors first. When you group it, if there's a negative there, move that negative over so that it's with that second set of parentheses there. If you can't find anything common, try swapping the middle terms and do it again. If when you factor stuff out that's common, if you notice that the signs are different, factor a negative out of one of those parentheses here, and that should fix that problem there. All right, good luck.